Today we're going to be working on the crop. The crop basically just follows the head shape. Real simple. It's typically following the head shape, kind of roundish at the top, and then it always dips in as soon as you get to that parietal ridge all the way around. So most of our sectioning patterns, and this is what I want you to take away from this today, follow shape fall. So whatever that finished look is going to be, we're going to be cutting in that direction. So really building up weight lines and then collapsing as we get underneath. This one we leave a little more weight than we would on a typical, well that's not true, I mean sometimes I leave it like this, but we're going to take this a little shorter with some other techniques later in some later videos. So basically just leaving that short fringe. I left a little weight here. You could take that off and kind of follow the shape of the head and go a little tighter if you wanted. I like to leave a little bit of playfulness there. It gets a little boring to just kind of cut to about the length of your fingers, do the whole haircut and do the crops that way, which is what you mostly see out there. So I tend to do some weight shifts and some weight play, some playful weight shifts in the top of the head as I come through, just to give me something, some sort of texture, something that sets me apart from everybody else's crops. That's what I'm looking at, and that's what I think you should be taking away, is like how you would do this, how you would tweak it, where you could shift weights, where you could leave it heavier in a spot, and that's what you should be taking away from the crop. Otherwise, pretty simple, straightforward haircut, very, very visual. Let's get into it. Okay guys, today we're gonna go over the crop. The crop is basically just any short haircut that follows the shape of the head. It is really quite short most of the time. I usually call the crop like the stuff that doesn't have a lot of weight movement and that sort of thing in it. Even though there might be some weight shifts inside of the interior, it's mostly a haircut that's just following the shape of the head. So this is one of those haircuts that beats into you the idea that if you just watch the shape that you're trying to create and watch shape fall in the haircut, then you're way better off than trying to follow a guide. Okay, so this is one of those perfect things that where someone can tell you, someone that's next to you can be like, oh, you're doing that technically incorrect all day long. They can say that. Let them say it. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the final product. Okay, so this is one of those things where I feel like cutting with your eye is just far more useful than trying to follow guides. All right, so we're gonna take that back section just like we would, and we're gonna section the guide section off. And I'm typically not going to, you won't see me section this into two sections very often. I'm usually just gonna watch that shape as I put it in, as it comes around the head and then down into the graduation. That's kind of what I'm watching more than anything else on these short kind of croppy haircuts. Okay, so if we were looking at this from the back, right? If we were looking at this from the back, you would have that one center guide, and then as you transition and pivot it off of it, you would just come through to the next section. Transition off of it, come through to the next section. If you notice, like every time I'm just shifting it over once, but I'm going across and bringing the top of the center guide in every single time. So as you transition or pivot around, right, and you travel that guide, you're not gonna create a new guide at the top. So the most important thing that you're ever watching here is what you're doing with your entrance point and then how you're coming out and shaping for the rest of the haircut. That is all that matters. So if you wanna decide to go in a little tighter here, pretty easy, you just go in a little tighter there. All right, so that's kind of what we're watching. A lot of times on these crops, I might actually bring this over the top. So it's really up to you. I would suggest starting with a little bit of length there, and then when you get to your top section, you could bring it over the top just to make sure that you have all that weight that you wanted. So transitioning that through the back, do that again on the other side, and then like if this was let's go with this being the strong side, you might take sectioning patterns that more feel like kind of almost rounded on the shape. And that's kind of what we'll do today, I think, because I think that'll show you where I'm really looking at shape fall. I'm really looking at the hair is gonna fall. If the hair doesn't fall perfectly vertical, right? So like a lot of times when we're looking at this, and that's the top of the head. Like, I see a lot of people just take these perfect verticals, or these are horizontals rather, take these perfect horizontals, right? But the problem is the hair doesn't fall perfectly horizontal when they were wearing it. So the sectioning pattern doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So once you put that thing in, that part in, and then you start to work it with the shape of the way she's gonna wear it, or he's gonna wear it, depending. This is basically just a men's haircut without the taper. So you're just looking at it like, what is that shape gonna give me? Let me transition to what I want the end product to be. So you gotta look down the road a little bit and figure out how they're gonna wear it. And then that is shape fall. So you wanna be cutting as close to how they're gonna wear it as possible. If you're just following guides here, you're gonna get weight lines and stuff, or you're gonna take away weight in areas you wanna leave it, and vice versa. More importantly, you're gonna take away weight in areas you want weight. But both are big problems. And then afterwards, like a lot of times I'm cutting this on someone that already has short hair. So I'm just kind of touching up the exterior before I go in and do the layering pattern. And then if they're longer shapes and I'm going into this, I'm usually gonna go ahead and cut the length off first and then touch up the exterior line at the end. So either way works, but I tend to find that it works a little better if I leave the length when it's longer and then just touch up at the end. Or vice versa, when it's shorter, like I'm kind of gonna touch up that. You could do both, but that's my druthers. That's my that's the way that kind of works best for me. But it's not a rule of thumb. Do whichever you're inclined to do. It's pretty simple, so we're just gonna go through and do that cut now. All right, guys, we're gonna start our technical cut. I'm gonna incorporate the entire crown into the head, and I'm going to go radial section from top back of the ear to top back of the ear across. Pulling out that center section. She has a few different techniques on her, so we have a little bit of a asymmetric weight on here, a little G-bob type action on it. So we're just going to kind of pull this out and really start to follow. So I cut most of my short stuff with a razor, but to be honest with you, that's just for speed, because when I cut short hair, doesn't matter if I use the scissors or the razor, I cut so loose that you can't really see it either way. I'm gonna go a little higher with the top of this crown. Sectioning my next section now. Kind of pivoting off of the top of my previous section, making sure that I don't cut into that again. Center of section, real loose. Just keeping it really loose, so just all kinds of blends and stays loose and lovely together. Next section is my last section on this side. Pivoting. I want to show you this from the profile. And I'm just gonna hold that up. Already cut on the very top of that. And then walking that through. Now, I am, as I come forward here, going to go a little tighter as I transition into the front. I don't do it too tight though, most of the time. I usually leave a little bit of weight for just a little softer feeling, a little softer flow. Personal druthers. I will get up into doing like scissor over comb and stuff, but I'm not opposed to it, I just don't do it a lot. Just walking that line. Notice that I don't come off of this much. So I take it, I start to work my shape in, and see my hand stays at my cut point. I just move the next section, and once it gets there, I move my hand out of the way and hold. All right, grab my stool, and I'm going to start to fix this graduation where it had an asymmetric weight last time. And basically all I'm doing, and you could have done this all in one section if you wanted. Back to that center guide there. And then I'm just going to figure out, okay, well, I want that much weight at my occipital. And then I'm going to get this fairly tight because we have a fairly tight shape going on in the back because of that weight that was already put in there. Just walking right there, right down. Right at my cut point, walking that down the shape, really following that in. Constantly moving that hair about so we can watch. Coming across all the way. I'm just going in there, watching that occipital, and then working that in a little tighter. And I can get it sort of tight in there, but most of the time if I want to go tighter than that, I got to do scissor over comb, point cut over comb, something like that. Some sort of technique to get in there and get it as tight as I want it at the end of the day. Just attacking it right there, and then boom. Bring it. Always got to bring this last section just slightly forward so you don't get like weird weight lines on that hairline behind the ear down into the nape. That head like kind of turns and dips in so fast that you really need to make sure you watch that, because if you invert it at all, you're going to get heaviness there. And this area right there behind the ear is the last place you want any kind of weight. So I'm just going to touch this up real quick. Even on a real guest too, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't want to be, once I've cut that section, I'm probably going to go in and just put my finished shape on it real quick, because I don't always want to just look at like a bunch of tendrils hanging down towards the end. So, and then they might be able to see like a little weight on those corners from the mirror, which looks a lot like a mullet shape. So if you're not going for a mullet shape, you want to put them at ease by like getting that kind of touched up so they don't stare at it and think you made a mistake for half of the haircut. All right, just gonna move into this strong side here, and I'm just gonna rock it with the shape. the shape's gonna fall kind of in that sectioning pattern. So just watching it. So if it was coming, if you were gonna push it forward, right, I would be doing my sectioning, kind of working with that shape. But if you're gonna put it down into the back, right, and that hair is gonna kind of come across and then back in the front, that's kind of the shape you. So I would just push it into the style that you're going for, and then you could just section off of that. What makes it a lot more simple for you. And then I'm gonna leave a little bit of weight from that, at that part, so it doesn't jump up. So all I did was kind of invert that part hair a little bit left, and I kind of force it with my knuckle over, and then just kind of cut the shape off of that. And then just keep walking that down. In the salon, a lot of times I'm doing this with a razor, so I like the speed of the razor with short, because so much of it is the visual cut at the end. So you see, now I don't have any of these pineapple things. I got a little extra weight there that I can use to transition out. Just leave that angle. Next section. Center of section. I can feel the tension from years of cutting hair. If you just want to like practice this idea, it's like I can kind of feel in my hand that I have tension that's equal on both sides of my hand from the hair on the left and the hair on the right side of the part. So you can feel center of part, or center of section rather. So typically when I'm cutting these sides, I'm trying to stay out of your way a little bit, but as I'm cutting these sides, I would be more down here, but it's a little harder for the camera to see it. I would be, my fingers would be coming up from underneath, and I would just be walking that down into that side and really watching my shape, what I'm gonna get there. So the mannequin gets a little crazy around the front, especially this one. It's really short. So I would say if you can make it look like anything good, you've done your work. Clients, with all the textures and the fun, playful stuff that they have in their hairs, basically, if you can make a mannequin look good, you can make a client look good, no problem. Just working that right on top of where it's going to go. I think I'm going to sweep these slightly. I don't think I'm going to do anything straight down yet. But if I do decide to go straight down, I've got enough hair here to make that decision. Just really watching. The mannequin has far more hair right here than a real person, so just watching the weight right there to make it make sense on the mannequin. That would be a cut you probably wouldn't have to have done on a real person. I've taught my entire career, so I really understand the density shifts between real people and the mannequin head. So I kind of constantly try to remind people that, you know, eye on a mannequin is basically, you cut the hair on a mannequin here, on a real person, that's Elizabethan. If you cut it here on a real person, it's mid forehead. If you cut it like mid eye, it's really eye or eyebrow. If you cut it under the eye, it's really like kind of top eye, right? If you cut it nose, it's really like kind of bottom eye. So you just have to understand the density shifts and stuff from the mannequin. So I don't necessarily look at the mannequin, I kind of feel for, especially the part, right? Because on a real person, the amount of hair that would be here, you would be kind of like corner of the eye on most parts. But the mannequin almost forces you on the inside of the eye because of the hair shift. So, you know, that's just like something that I know these shapes are happening. There's far more hair up at the top in the front and on the crown than on real people. So I just kind of keep that in mind as I'm cutting. So even though I'm cutting to make this mannequin look good, I'm more cutting to make a real haircut at this length look good on a real person. So you might see different changes, you know, that kind of don't make sense for this mannequin that would make sense on a real client. So kind of what's going on in my head. This side's a little bit easier to show you because this is more natural for me in the salon. And I can get this, you know, I don't have to go tight here on my wet pass because, you know, if I have a little playfulness over the ears and then I want to keep it, that's awesome. I can do that dry, make that decision dry. But if I don't have that playfulness, right, I'm kind of screwed. If I get to my dry cut and I didn't leave something, I didn't leave myself the decision. And like, you know, repeatedly we talk about in here that hairdressing is like a game of being able to make decisions. Especially on mannequin, there would never be this much hair right in the top of the part on the weak side, just wouldn't happen. So we just try to do the best we can with the mannequins. It is what it is. And also it would never kind of, well, I mean, that's not true. You might get really strange hairlines on a real person too, but this one doesn't allow for this hair to kind of kick this way and this hair to kick this way, and you to have to forces you to make a decision on how to cut it. The mannequin kind of pops all over the place because of the way it's woven, so you really don't get to make any decision with how to cut it. Like, it just is the way it is. So a lot of times, like right here, like these little bits here, like I might even just chop them off all the way down to the root to make the haircut make sense at the end. So just kind of little things. All right, that's the wet cut. So I'm gonna dry this off. All right guys, a quick word before we get started on this. These short haircuts to me are basically technical, they're basically visual haircuts that like technically I wanna get through as quick as possible. Okay, so I wanna get to that visual haircut. That's the decision making. That's what's gonna separate my haircuts from everyone else. And the visual haircut is basically built for the guest, right? I feel like the technical haircut might be built more for the stylist or for companies or people or educators to be able to tell you you're doing it wrong. Okay, that's something that like I've never believed in. Like at the end of the day, if you get somewhere and they love it, that's what matters. Okay, like simply don't let someone say, oh, you're not taking these perfect sectioning patterns, like it's bad. That's just not true. So take sectioning patterns to get through the haircut. That's a technical, precise, like it's good to have that sort of precision, But at the end of the day, like, that's not hairdressing. That's just how to get through the wet cut fast. Hairdressing really happens in the dry cut. It really happens with that visual cut. That is everything. That is the one piece that separates everyone from good to great. If you're not doing the finish work at the end, if you're not taking that time to visually cut it for the guest, you're just not winning. Because, and I'll challenge anyone to this, and I've said this my whole career, like, or you could challenge anyone to this, is you would take 3 different clients, neither of us know, right? And you give them a questionnaire and ask them over the first month, second month, third month, which haircut or how much they love their haircut as it grew out, right? I'm gonna win that every time because we're taking out weight, we're putting in movement, we're cutting hair for their texture, right? We're not just cutting hair one time so that we can get them out of the chair so it looks good when we blow dry it, right? Like I spent a lot of time blow drying with a Denman brush when I was younger, and the truth of that is, it shows you everything. It shows you every little mistake, but the problem is it's just there for the salon educator to correct and tell you you did wrong, right? And I don't believe in that. I really believe that, like, this is a visual, fun hairdressing. The idea of just taking something and breaking it down into pieces just so we can see who can follow a guide, like, perfectly just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, right? Like, have fun with this industry, enjoy it. Like, you got into it to have fun, cut with a feeling, right? The hairdressing is just gives you so much more fulfillment when you can do it based on your own feeling and your own thing, right? Like, don't follow someone that cut hair like 70 years ago. That doesn't make any sense at all. Cut hair to today's standards, to their textures, and you'll see your, like, hairdressing just explode. I can't reiterate that enough, because right now, like, okay, it's a good haircut and I followed a technical guide, but it's nothing really. It's really, like, I mean, I would never let a guest leave like this. Like, knowing what I know now and watching all those technical haircuts when I was younger and watching people do technical haircuts, I just look at them and I just, like, it's so unfinished, right? So take the time, really train your eye and really get to finishing haircuts the way you want to do them. Sometimes a finished haircut is only just a technical haircut. There is no dry cutting. That's okay, but most of your game, I don't live in the anomalies field, so most of your game, most of your hairdressing should be to the guest, cutting with softness, cutting with life, cutting with feeling, cutting with their texture, teaching them how to style their own texture. That's hairdressing in a nutshell. All right, I'm gonna do most of this with, basically I'll start by pulling some of the weight out of this and getting that movement in there. So with this, it's long enough that I would probably come over and slice from the other side, but as I come down a little bit, it's a little shorter. I'm not gonna be able to do that. I don't wanna be hanging all over her head. So I wanna go in there, put some really strong separation in. The goal isn't to just thin this down. It's to get in there and put separation in it. That's like, when people see my hairdressing, that's what they think is happening, that I'm just thinning the crap out of it. That's not true. I'm not trying to thin hair ever. I'm just putting separation in it so it will move. And I want to be careful every section that I pick up that I, like, kind of alternate and make it, I don't want to keep thinning and kind of texturizing through the same area all the way down the head. That's going to look strange. So really kind of blending it out. And you see, like, right now, I mean, that's a shape, right? So you can follow your guides all you want. Like, I'm just going to go in here and visually cut through my shape that I put in and really get it to soften and flow for the haircut that I'm doing. So right here on a real guest, I'd probably be going pretty tight here. I'm not going to do that because we have some haircuts to follow this. That we need that weight there so we can show those techniques. So just working that down, and I'm just kind of melting it off into my exterior. And you can see right now it's already started to collapse that into the final length. And here is where I am gonna, like, kind of do a lot more chops, because I don't want just like a bunch of separation there. I just want that real soft right now and tenderly. This area gets really heavy right around the front. That's not, a guest wouldn't get that heavy, but I'm gonna correct it just by slide cutting a touch. All right, so I've moved over here to the weak side. I know I had some weight there, so I'm gonna leave that for a second and I'm gonna come back. Just really breaking that up, following that shape down. Just adjusting this hairline to make it more realistic. And every now and then, if you get like some weird tuft there at the front, I do the same thing there. I just kind of like do like a slicing or a walking method of taking that off, and I just ease that hair, almost layer it on top of itself, so it just kind of takes the curse out of this long tendrily piece. Okay, so typically I would go around the whole head first and do that, but I'm gonna come up here and then just slice through. I kind of left this weight so I could come in the same direction as I came in, but I want more movement than that. So if I come in the same direction, I'm more thinning than separating, okay? So when it drops on itself, I just took weight underneath of itself, so it's always gonna fall heavy again, except for I took some weight out. So if I move to horizontal here, if the hair is gonna fall, shape fall like that, if I move to a horizontal section to that, right, and I slice through it, that's gonna give me the most separation. So I can really kind of come in here and carve out some weight along this section. I'm not gonna mess with the fringe because that I'll do at the end, as always. Really slice through that, and then drop my next section down. And you can see that shape is in there. I don't want to kill the shape. I know I don't want to kill the shape, but I really want to get separation in there. So I'm putting 2 or 3 kind of slices in there. I never take away the length, so the length still makes sense for the haircut that I did. It's just now I have separation. It really blends that color out, really makes everything look pretty coming through, and I can just a little separation in that first section that I didn't horizontally cut. And then now I'm going to make my way around to the back and just kind of point cut over comb and walking that section down. Point cut over comb, walking that section down. And here, if I want to tighten up on a real person, I just actually cut off a little bit more length as I come down, and that will collapse that shape along with that. If you just do this technique alone, it's going to come in a little bit tighter as you come down, but it's almost like a point cut over comb, scissor over comb technique where I can get shorter with each section coming in, and then in these last sections either I can go much tighter like I'm doing, or I can scissor over comb that, which I don't want to do because I do have some techniques that I want to do on this mannequin for future videos. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm trying to keep my entire program to 2 to 3 haircut, or 2 to 3 mannequins in the salon per student. That's really important because when you're running a program, these things are expensive. You're running a program, you can't just do 10 mannequins for each guest or each student. That just gets really expensive. So we try to limit it to a process that we stay in. That's why all the videos are numbered. So I'm trying to stay in that 2 to 3 haircuts. And then what you can do is, like, if they go too far on one mannequin, you can take a mannequin from a previous student and do the next technique or something. So that's what's happening. That's what I'm thinking about with my program. I know I'm kind of covering it with my elbow. There's not like a great way for me to do this, but you get the point. Just kind of lifting up on itself, not too far away from shape fall, and just putting the shape that I want in there. And if I want, I can travel up with the occipital, with the parietal ridge rather. I can travel up with the parietal ridge and tighten up as I come through with with the same shape that the parietal ridge would be taking, right? So boom, 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 and coming out. So that's another shape that you could be doing as you tighten up. You can be thinking about the shape of that parietal ridge. All right, last scissor over comb section, or point cut over comb section. And it just doesn't matter how you get there. You could take the trimmers here and do trimmer over comb. You could just basically fade this out if you wanted, which is one of the things we're going to do to this mannequin as we get a little farther down the path. Just really watching my shape. So it looks like I'm kind of following with the pattern, which is true, but I'm more or less watching and walking my weight line. That's what I'm like. I'm watching my weight line as I come through more than I'm watching, oh, okay, I was here, now I need to be here, now I need to be here. I'm sort of doing that, but at the same time, I'm more watching how my weight line is walking through the haircut. That's more important to me. I have to understand that my weight line is shifting like this, coming through and down. So I'm watching that, and that's where it needs to tighten, right? Because that's the head shape. The head shape's like a little bigger, rounder, bigger. And underneath of that, that's that graduation. That's where you transition to graduation. That's the whole point of having the top to the head, and then the graduated area, that head, where the head is like tightening down as it comes, as the hairline comes down. All right, so now I would just visually haircut this. I just decide how I want everything. I'm going to go a little bit shorter on this side to make sense for that side. And this is that spot I told you about, so forgive me when I just chop it off. Because that's how it would sit on a real person. That's how I'm going to put it. So I'm kind of lifting up, and then I can make a decision. Do I want to layer it, so I'm going on top of its section, right? Or do I want to carve it and put some separation there, right? You see how if I carve it, it puts more separation in. If I go from the side, or if I want to do a combination, a little thinning, a little carving, that's just in between. So not on top, not from the side, on that diagonal. That's going to help push that. It's going to thin, layer, and put a little negative space in and blend it to the side, but I won't get those separations. I will get some movement over, which is why it's more important, or it's a little more aggressive than just the layering thinning technique where I lift up. So if I wanted to keep this area heavy right here on top of this, often I'm just going to lift up slightly right above shapefall and then just layer that area right there, and then boom, that will take all that weight out of the connection. For me, that section between the exit point of the bang and the entrance point of the forward graduation, it's always going to be the weightiest. So in order for me to get that weight out, I'm often pulling up and walking down and just loosely layering right on top of that one area, and then I might come above it and like carve in some weight to get a little movement out of that layering on top of it. So that's kind of what's going on, and that allows me to keep it thick around the hairline, but at the same time not be too weighty. All right, and on someone with this kind of shape, I'm often kind of just lifting up, doing a little twist back cutting, just for softness. I'm just like really allow the hair to kind of tell me what to do. If there's weight in an area that I don't like, I just go ahead and cut it. Once I'm popping this up, and right here, I'm definitely going to be watching color. If I'm in my salon and I'm cutting someone after color, I'm definitely watching color on this section, really trying to make the best color job possible, because that's my goal, is I'm also cutting the color. That's like a next level. Right now, when you're first getting going, you can't really think about that yet, but that's like next level stuff where you get to the point where you're cutting color as well. Now, I would be looking at it if it's too blonde in one area, too dark in another area, and you know they weren't going for that. You need to be able to adjust on the fly and make good decisions. All right, I'm just gonna, so I would pinch over this ear if I wanted to shorten a little bit. So I'm gonna do it just a touch, just to keep it a little pixied. And then really kind of getting that hairline the way I want it there. And then same thing over here. I'm just gonna kind of pinch down right at shapeful. I lift up just slightly for softness. If you do it right at its spot, one, you run the risk of digging into them with your scissor, but more importantly, it might be too heavy of a cut. So I just raise up slightly for softness. And just visually shaping that exactly how I want it. That's like, if it's too clunky there, just go ahead and come in from the side and just take a little bit out. Now you don't want to break cut it. You want to make sure that that cut's slowly cutting as you're coming out, because then you won't get any of those like harsh weight lines. Right? And I'm watching everything. I'm watching how much I need to layer here. I want to make sure that there's no weight line and then collapse. I want to watch everything with these cuts. My last thing on almost all of these, if I left some weight up here on the top, I would just come through and make sure I'm getting everything. So if I wanted to go a little bit more layering right on the part somewhere, I could just pull that up and layer out slightly into the hair that I left heavier. Or I could come in, if it was too like blocky here, I could come in and put some sort of separation in and carving in from the side, and that would allow me to take that weight out and get it to move. This is pretty good. I'm gonna call it a day on this one, so I don't cut off too much for the next haircut. I'll style it out. All right guys, that's the finished haircut. Just rocking those shape sections right with the shape, right with how you're gonna wear it, just right along. That whole back section, treat it as one section and just kind of walk it through, just constantly collapsing that weight once you get to the parietal ridge and below, really tightening it with the side of the head too on both sides, making sure to keep balance. This is where I see most people like get a little weird. It's like you do one side and this side's heavier, and then you come over here and you lose your balance because you didn't leave a little bit of weight at the top of that section. So it kind of makes the haircuts look a little asymmetric. So just kind of paying attention to that weight shift and making sure your weight is the same on both sides. That's what the mirror for. It's why it's the most important tool that we use every day in the hair salon. Mirror is balance and checking shape. That's it. That's what it's for. If you're not looking at the mirror, you're not cutting hair. That is what it is. We go through and I do some, I show you some dry finishing techniques on them. I will throw my whole gamut of techniques at people. Like, I just make the hair do whatever I want it to do while I'm cutting, and I get into a zone. I just stop thinking about technique and stuff, and I just look at where I want the hair to go. Boom, I put it there. That's all you should be thinking about at the end of the day. So looking forward to it. We're going to do some haircuts after this, but we're going to get in a little tighter on the bottom, and we'll show you some of those scissor over comb, scissor over everything techniques, and go from there. I hope you liked it. Thank you.